Hi, welcome to Talking Heads. Today we're talking to Dr. Lucy Burke, who is a Principal Lecturer in the English Department of Critical Theory, specialising in disability studies, among other disciplines. Hi Lucy.
Hi.
Would you like to tell us some of the things you do within the department?
Okay, well in terms of teaching, I teach mainly critical and cultural theory at undergraduate level, but what we do there is we have sort of aspects of those units will cover things like disability studies and some work that I do in medical humanities as well. So I'm interested in sort of cognitive learning disability, I guess, and the ways in which that gets explored and thought about in literature and life writing and film, and the ways in which that problematises and questions sort of receive theoretical models, and so that's a lot of the kind of work that I focus on.
So it sounds like your research kind of touches upon how there are a lot of questions at the moment of how English and humanities is relevant to certain problems within today's society.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose what my work does is, I suppose it's born out of people's experience of that sort of difference. So I got interested in conditions like dementia, but particularly the Alzheimer's, is the way we think about dementia, and interested in the ways in which things like medical diagnoses can suddenly sort of transform a person into a kind of entity to be pitied, or someone who's perceived to suffer. And I was interested in the ways in which literature and film and television and those kinds of imaginative texts, as well as sort of autobiographical texts, can tell a different sort of story to the dominant story that gets told. And because my son's autistic, and experiencing how he grows up, I never felt that his life was a tragedy. I've always felt that he was the best thing ever, and I always wanted and was interested in telling a sort of story about him that was about how my experience of being a parent changed the way I thought about things, and changed the way I thought about language, and changed the way I thought about disability, and changed the way I thought about people's relationships and ideas about dependency and caring and all those kinds of things. I sort of brought that to my academic research, and what I found in looking at literature and film is that as soon as people start to think differently about those conditions, they can produce new ways of knowing what it is to have them, and that can be transformative. That's not just about a bunch of academics sitting together in a seminar and discussing a reading of a particular novel. It's about actually changing people's perceptions, and that's why I think it's so important. And a lot of my work has been, about trying, I suppose, to encourage people to think differently, and to think differently about things that they might initially have a kind of set of negative perceptions about. So yeah.
So it transforms it from maybe a kind of difficult other medical issue to a real life, current kind of personal issue.
Well, I think it's a kind of cultural issue. I think it's a collective issue. I think a lot of the ways people think about disability is, so people tend to individualise it, or people tend to think, oh, what a terrible burden, or what a terrible problem. I think that thinking about it differently, changing the terms, the ways people think about what it means to live with a form of, a kind of difference, has very significant social effects. I think if you live in a culture where people are reduced to cost-benefit analyses, when people think, oh, well, this person costs the state a lot of money, then you're lost. Then you kind of go down a path where everything is instrumental, everything is about the perceived the sort of perceived financial burdens, or the perceived kind of social burdens of someone, and that reduces what it is to be a human and a person, and it reduces what it means to live a life fully. And the reason why literature and film and television is so important is because they can think beyond that. and they can allow us to think beyond those kinds of really reductive and sort of damaging ways of understanding what it is to be a human in the world. And so I suppose that's the kind of the aim of what I do, really.
We know that you used to work at the University of Manchester.
I did, yeah.
Maybe inform us on some of the differences or similarities, and maybe some gossip.
Gossip. My first job ever was at the University of Manchester, and it was very unexpected that I got that job because I was 2 years into my PhD, and I applied for it thinking it would be practice, and then much to my surprise I got it. And there were lots of other sort of personal things alongside that, and I got pregnant at exactly the same time, about a week after I'd been given this job, and so I started my first job with a baby. Literally I had her a month into the job, finishing my PhD, so it was a bit of a baptism of fire. And I had been to and studied at Sussex University prior to that, and Sussex University was perceived to be very radical. It had lots of very eminent theorists there, people who have world reputations, and Sussex, when I was there, was kind of the place to be if you were interested in theory, post-colonial theory, queer theory, sort of Marxist literary theory. There were Derrida. There were loads and loads of people there, and it was really exciting to be there. Manchester was very traditional, and the department when I went into it was full of people who were older than my dad, and I was one of very few number of women, and the only young woman with a baby, so it didn't start brilliantly. And what I found often was I would be the only person in a room who'd been to a state school.
Really?
And so that was a bit of a shock for me. In terms of teaching as well, the kind of profile of the students was tended to be very privileged, people who had had lots of support through their A-levels, and eventually I started to want to be in a different environment and to be teaching people for whom going through school and university, for a lot of the students at Manchester, it was just a given that they were going to go get their degree and go into well-paid jobs in the city in London. There was a level of confidence, there was a level of just a set of assumptions about what people were entitled to. So I suppose it's about entitlement, and the atmosphere in the department was very traditional, wasn't that receptive to the kind of work I wanted to do, and the kind of work I was doing. And there were a lot of battles that had been going on for a long time that I didn't really understand, but that I sort of seemed to be part of because I was a new member of staff. So I resigned because I thought that life was too short.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 5 years. And there were other circumstances which I won't go into, but were also kind of underpinned that. And so I got a job here, and I absolutely love teaching here, and I have always loved teaching here, and I love teaching here. I've got to say, I teach exactly the same material here that I studied at Sussex and that I taught at Manchester. So when people describe, sometimes people have this kind of negative attitude towards post-92 institutions. I would say, intellectually speaking, that's just rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. I teach the same material, I construct similarly difficult courses, and the theory courses are difficult, and I grade people's papers and essays with exactly the same sort of criteria. Some of the smartest people I've ever encountered I've taught here, and I think the best of our students are absolutely comparable to the best of the students you would get at a Russell Group institution.
That's so interesting because we have these kind of preconceptions.
It's completely untrue. It's completely untrue, and there's a broader range of students here. there are students, and the student body here is much more diverse, and in general the student body here is less confident. And so one of the major battles is getting people to realise how good they are. But I don't think that A-level results are destiny. I don't think that how you do when you're 18 is a measure of what you can achieve, is a measure of your kind of intellectual potential. I think a lot of A-levels is about how well you've been taught to do A-levels. It's about the kind of background you come from. It's about the resources available, and and those are social, economic, cultural barriers. Once people get here, and what I would hope is that university can be this sort of level playing field where you can really be encouraged to realise how good you are. And the thing that I love about teaching here is that when people really do get it and they realise how good they are, they really flourish. And we have students who go on to do postgraduate work at Oxford and Cambridge and other places. They are as good as these other students from Russell Group universities. They just started from probably a different place, a different kind of perception of what they could do. And one of my, I've taught loads of students I think are brilliant, but I taught one student a couple of years ago, and she, her perception of herself was that she wasn't that good, and she came to every class and she worked unbelievably hard, and she had absolute humility about herself. She had no sense of how brilliant she was, and she got a first, and she was so smart, and the difference was she just didn't realise how smart she was. That's the big difference. And the rest of it, the problem for people is that it's all about perception. So I can say, hand on heart, the English degree we run here is as varied, as intellectually challenging, as kind of as kind of difficult as anything I've taught in these other institutions. The main difference is the public perception of these different institutions, and that seems to make the difference. So if people say this place is better than that place, it's not based on any truth or any substance, but it's based on a perception. And obviously it's in the interest of some institutions for that to continue, because, well, clearly it is, right? And people like to think they are superior to other people, but I think it's groundless.
Okay. Thanks so much for talking to us.
That's a pleasure.